And we're live. Okay, welcome back to another installment of Reading Rewards the Reader. This is Bible edition. We're reading the Bible chronologically, and want to do that for a couple reasons. Just a recap from last time. This is only our second episode, so not much to catch up on if you're behind. But what we're doing is instead of reading the Bible front to back, we're reading it chronologically. That's kind of the gimmick, right? And you can see off to the side here, this is our list of how we're going to read. So today we're on Genesis chapter 4 through 7. And to refresh us on the ground rules, why are we doing this? What are the goals? The first goal is to read the Bible, right? It's a text that's been around for a long time, and it's been pretty transformative and sticky and shaped a lot of human history. So that's interesting. Let's read it. Let's see what it has to say, and let's kind of take it at face value and talk about the themes and just kind of what's going on in it as we read through it chronologically. The other goals are we're going to ask if it makes a difference. Does it really matter to us today? Like, is anything in the Bible that's been kind of a big deal through history? Like, how does that impact us, right? And then the only rule we have so far is we're going to keep an open mind. Again, just take it at face value and see what it has to say. The only other thing I've been thinking about is, originally I was going to read, the chunk of the Bible passage that we have. So today you can see up on the side here, 4 through 7, um, and then give a few thoughts about it. As I was thinking about this section, there's so much going on, especially in Genesis. So many new characters being introduced and like really interesting interactions and situations with like the character of God, the character of Cain and Abel, especially as we're going to start out with. It might be helpful to maybe stop in between each chapter and talk a little bit about it. So I'm going to try that tonight. And generally, I like to just read everything as a chunk and go from there. But we'll see. We'll see how this works. So that's it. Let's jump in. We are again in Genesis chapter 4. You'll notice I started in the NIV version last time. I switched to the ESV today, and we might switch around a little more in future ones just to kind of get a taste of the different types of Bible translations. I think they all probably have benefits, and they all can do, can emphasize different things for us. So today's going to be the ESV version, English Standard Version, and we're jumping into Genesis chapter 4. So let's read. Now Cain, Cain and Abel. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why is your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, Where is Abel your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Then the Lord said to him, Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Mehujael, and Mehujael fathered Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech. Lamech took two wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other was Zillah. Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77fold. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth, for she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. All right, that is chapter 4. I think the next few chapters I'll read all together, but this one is just so crazy. I wanted to jump into it for a little bit real quick. We have the story of Cain and Abel, right? That is just a huge story that is so well known, I think, throughout culture, and the idea of a brother killing a brother, the idea of two brothers bringing a sacrifice to God, I guess. Did they call it that? What do they call it? An offering, right? So they had to bring an offering to the Lord. So I don't know how that sprang up, right? Because last chapter was kind of like Adam and Eve did the bad thing. They got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Now they have kids, and there's this thing about bringing an offering to the Lord, of offering things to God. That's kind of an interesting concept there, of offering things to a deity, right? And this is the first instance of that. We see that in Genesis. And so it's this idea of taking what you have poured your work into and releasing it back, I guess, to find favor. And so we see that Cain and Abel both had different reactions from God, right? So Abel presented his and found favor. The Lord had regard for Abel, it says. Cain presented his, and the Lord, for whatever reason, did not have regard for Cain's offering. So this idea of sacrifice, this idea of offering to a deity, of giving up what you have produced, of giving up maybe like the sweat of your brow or the work of your hands to this God character, it's just kind of an interesting concept. Like, why are they doing that? Why is that the thing? Why is that the play, right? Something worth thinking about and I think pondering for a little while, which I'll be doing for sure. So we don't really know exactly why God rejected one brothers and not the others. A lot of, I think, people probably have different opinions on this, but I'm not sure that's as important as what happens because of it. So God accepts one, rejects the other, and so the other, being rejected, he's angry. He was actually very angry, right? It says, so Cain was very angry and his face fell. Why are you angry? Said God, if you do well, you'll be accepted. If you don't do well, sin is crouching at the door. You must rule over it. That's pretty interesting too. So that's the idea of sin. So now sin, we saw probably like the first sin, right? Of where Adam and Eve took the fruit and ate it in the last chapter. And so now there's another mention of sin here, where sin is like personified, right? It's like God gives us the image of sin crouching down and wanting to like take over or overpower Cain. And a lot of people talk about sin being, sin is something you do wrong, something is bad, something that you do that is bad, or something that like God doesn't like, or maybe something that's immoral or something that hurts another person. I've heard sin defined as just simply missing the mark, which I think is like maybe where the root word comes from. So it's like an archery term. When you miss the mark, that's sin. And so that's interesting. I'm not sure if that really captures what's going on here, though, with the whole personification of sin. When you miss the mark in archery or something like that, that's not something that's like wanting to devour you or take you over. That's more of a benign thing that just happens as you try things, right? So I'm not sure that quite captures it, but anyway, we'll move on from that point. This is sin. Here it is. And we see what happens next, right? First, murder recorded in human history. Kind of a big deal, I guess. And so Cain kills Abel. The most, I think, interesting to me thing I've heard about this part is how, like, Cain wasn't necessarily angry at Abel, right? Cain was probably, well, it says Cain was angry. when God rejected his sacrifice, right? And so we've all been rejected. We had to deal with that. We're often angry when there's rejection. And I think it's easy to be angry at the one who rejects you. I think that's perfectly natural. That's a human response, right? And so I think it stands to reason that Cain is angry at God. But Cain can't kill God, right? Cain can't attack God, but he can attack Abel, which, as we read in the previous couple chapters, they're all made right in the image of God. God formed man out of the dust, breathed life into him, and so now we see that male and female created in the image of God. So Cain strikes back against God by killing Abel, and so I think that is a pretty helpful understanding of what's going on here. And I think that's one thing that maybe we can also apply as we think about the world that we live in and how we interact. I think a lot of times things happen that are just happenstance or chance that make us angry. And when fate works against us, we're angry at fate, right? But we often strike back against people around us or those that we love or things that are happening in our life drive us to do things that we can't impact fate. We can't impact God like that. We can't fight back, but we can fight back against things in our lives. That's tough, right? That's something to think about. So we go through the rest of the story. Even something else that strikes me, even when Cain is punished by God, right? Rightfully so, right? Doing the first murder, that's killing someone who's made in the image of God, seems like a bad move. You don't want to do that. That just stands to reason. But even in that, God is merciful to Cain, right? He shows him mercy. He protects him, and he says, "You'll be marked, so people don't attack you. You'll also, if anyone does attack you, you'll be avenged 7 times." Wow. So even though Cain has done this terrible thing, God's still taking care of him. It looks like Cain also has a wife. Don't know if that came before or after the whole Abel incident. It's not really clear. But you can see then there's a little bit of a family tree here. And so the Genesis narrative diverges from the Adam and Eve story, goes down into the Cain family tree, talks about that a little bit. And then this interesting little poem of Lamech talking to his 2 wives. It's interesting. It describes him having 2 wives. So that's, I think, the first instance of polygamy in the Old Testament, which there will be many more. And we'll probably talk more about that as we go through it. But there he goes. He gets a little speech going. And then it goes back to Adam, right? Now, the only last thing I want to say about this section is the last verse. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. I didn't really do any research into that or look up what that really means, but that just kind of stuck out to me as I read it. As, you have Cain kind of having a break from the main line. If you think of it that way, right? Adam and Eve, you could think of them as maybe the main line. Cain has a break because of his actions against Abel and his punishment and being driven away from the tribe by God. But people began to call on the name of the Lord. So for whatever happened, it seems that the knowledge of God and that, I guess, innate relationship thing they had going continued on, even through Cain's line as they were separated. Interesting. All right, that wraps up chapter 4. We have a few more chapters to go, so let's jump through it. Let me flip over. Did it go? It went. Okay, so here we go. Well, let's read. And I think we'll just read through because the rest is pretty much the story of Noah. Okay, Genesis 5 through 7. So let's read. This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them, and he blessed them and named them man when they were created. When Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived after he fathered Kenan 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he fathered Mahalalel. Kenan lived after he fathered Mahalalel 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he fathered Enoch. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son, and called his name Noah, saying, Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. After Noah was 500 years old, Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, I told you I'd just read straight through, but this is kind of interesting. Like, all these giant numbers has always kind of freaked me out a little bit. And we talked last time about, why is the Bible loved and why is the Bible hated, and why are people confused about it? And I think this is one of those things that is just like kind of trippy, right? I read this today, and I'm like, someone living 800 years, I have no concept of what that would even look like. Like, do they count time differently? Is this some kind of like weird linguistic trick of the text? Is this literal? Like, I don't really know where to come down on that, but it is like a pretty weird thing to my mind as I read it here in the year 2021. Something interesting too is where the one guy, Enoch, walked with God, and he was not, for God took him, implying he didn't actually die, right? God just snapped him up to who knows where. All right, let's move on. That was interesting. We're going to flip over to Genesis 6. Let's jump in. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things, excuse me, and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, its height 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark on its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you. And you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds according to their kinds, and of the animals according to their kinds, and of every creeping thing on the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come into you to keep them alive. Also take with you every sort of food that is eaten, and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. Wow. Okay, so pretty interesting stuff at the beginning of the chapter, stuff I don't know how to deal with, to be honest with you. And I think there's a lot of debate, I'm sure, among Bible scholars about that stuff with the Nephilim, the mighty men of renown, how there were the sons of God on the earth and they cross-mingled with humans. It seems like, hey, is that angels? Is that aliens? Is that something else? I don't know. Not really going to get into it. But what we can see is that God is still pretty involved in the project that he started a few chapters ago of creating this universe, of creating humanity. And so again, if we think through that lens of this text being written down or verbally, I guess, given to the Israelites, the Jewish people after the Exodus, you see that it's kind of part history, but also really a kind of explanation of God and this God that stands in kind of opposition at that time, stands in opposition to the gods of the nations around them that Moses and his people find themselves surrounded by. And again, it's kind of meant to show how they are separate, how they are different, how they're unique, and how this one singular God is different and special, and kind of talk about that. So again, this narrative then jumps into how humanity is wicked. And it's funny. I mean, you read that, not funny, but you read that the wickedness of man was great in the earth and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. It kind of like, that's kind of relatable. You know, you just pop on the news and you kind of see what's been going on. Even just in the past year or so. And it's like, wow, you know, like that seems about right. You know, get down to the flood. It's interesting to me how God dictates exactly how to build the ark, right? So this God who created all of humanity, all of the universe, he also dictates, hey, here's some dimensions for a boat that's going to keep you safe. And Noah builds it. Noah's capable. He does it. He does what God asks him to. He's faithful, right? And the text kind of makes a big deal about that. In fact, we see the first mention of a covenant, right? Verse 18, I will establish my covenant with you. And as we go through Genesis, we'll see how covenant is actually a pretty important thing as we talk about Abraham in a little bit. So something to point out there. That's where that's mentioned. And let's jump in. The last chapter for today, which is Genesis 7. Then the Lord said to Noah, go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and his mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and his mate, and 7 pairs of the birds of the heavens also, male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground. And Noah did all that the Lord had commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came upon the earth. And Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Of clean animals and of animals that are not clean, and of birds and of everything that creeps on the ground, 2 and 2, male and female, went into the ark with Noah as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days, the waters of the flood came upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them entered the ark. They and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kinds, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female, of all flesh, went in, as God had commanded him. And the Lord shut him in. The Lord con- I'm sorry, the flood continued 40 days on the earth. The waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters prevailed and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep, and all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, beasts, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. Everything on the dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground. Man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, they were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed on the earth for 150 days. That wraps up our reading for tonight. I hope this has been beneficial to you. We're right here in the middle of the flood story. It's a cool story, right? It's something that kids learn in Sunday school, and one of those myths that persists across a lot of different people groups historically. A lot of ancient people groups have like a flood story in their mythology, which is kind of interesting. But here we again see from the perspective of the author that God is basically unwinding everything that he did just a few chapters before, right? And if you take all those years of everyone's lives, like the 900 years, the 800 years here and there, like those generations, it's just a few thousand years later that God is like, whoa, this was a colossal mistake, and I'm going to start over with this one guy, Noah, who is doing a good job living his life in an upright way. But it's interesting. A lot to take in there. It's to me, it kind of stands out, like the whole Adam and Eve thing. It's almost like a failed experiment that God has to redo, right? He kind of starts all over again with Noah and Noah's family, and it's almost like why would God expect a different outcome the second time, right? That's interesting. All right. Again, appreciate you watching.